So my hot take for today, what I'm passionate about, is that AI product managers have a responsibility to drive an ethical approach to the development, really, of AI technologies within their organizations to ensure responsible development, testing, and deployment of AI-driven products.
Hello and welcome to another episode of One Night in Product Hot Takes Edition, where I speak to one person about one thing, get straight to the point, and find out what's on their mind. Now, if you've got something on your mind, why not head over to onenightinproduct.com/hot, where you can find a time, grab a slot, we can have a chat and share your opinions with the world. In any case, do remember to head over to onenightinproduct.com in general, where you can find all of my episodes with thought leaders and practitioners and all of my old hot takes, as well as links to the podcast and all of the podcast platforms, as well as YouTube, where you can like, share, subscribe, comment, notify, and all of those good things you can do over there. Anyway, enough of me. Let's get straight to Zoe Laycock's hot take. So in front of me, I see kind of a beigey background, slightly dimly lit with some hanging plants and a nice smiling person in front of it. So I'm going to throw straight over to you, the person in front of me, and ask you what your name is, where you're based, what you do for a living, and most importantly, what's your hot take?
Hi, I'm Zoe Laycock. I'm product marketing lead for a company called Diffblue, based out of London. And we make, our primary product is an AI agent that generates and manages the unit testing process for Java application development.
And what's your hot take?
So my hot take for today, what I'm passionate about, is that AI product managers have a responsibility to drive an ethical approach to the development, really, of AI technologies within their organizations to ensure responsible development, testing, and deployment of AI-driven products. And one of the reasons why I'm really passionate about that is, I'll just put it into context. So, we've all heard the phrases of software's eating the world. We've also familiar in the software development industry for about the last 10 to 15 years of that well-oiled phrase, which is, move fast and break things. But I'm here to kind of challenge whether that approach to innovation, to driving technology forwards, is still as applicable now that we're in the era of AI and AI-driven products.
All right, so there's two angles to this, and I'm going to explore the first angle first because it's something that I've spoken to people about before, and I'm curious to get your take. Is this idea of move fast and breaking things? Obviously famous from Facebook and stuff back in. I don't even think they say it anymore, but back then it felt like, yeah, sure, whatever, right? Because it wasn't that the stakes were low, but the competition was so few and far between that you almost had a chance to be embarrassed by your product. Obviously, a different person said that. But there's this kind of counter argument these days that almost there's so much competition. It's such a red ocean in any space that actually you do have to have a bit more of a sheen of quality on stuff. Aside from ethics, which we'll talk about in a sec, but just this general idea of you can't even move fast and break things anymore, because if you put something out that's half baked, people will just use one of the many competitors or alternatives, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there are implications of that approach that are a little bit outdated. One is it's kind of contrary to customer experience, right? And if you are customer experience, product experience driven, well, then the idea of just ship these days is not really as applicable as it used to be. Because, essentially companies now also have to be responsible for the quality of their product experience. And actually, the cost of disrupting customer experience or even serving up a really bad one can really, really, as you said, drive people to the competition. And there's always plenty of competition out there. But also can really have tangible economic impact and costs on that business in terms of its profitability, revenue streams, but also in terms of its reputation. And those can really exceed, the risk that might have been worth taking in the previously, which is just get things to market.
But the ethics thing and the ethics angle is definitely, it's definitely worth discussing. But it also strikes me that maybe, I know you talked about kind of AI as well, but product ethics is not like a new problem that people were great at before and they've got worse at now, right? Like it feels like some companies, and up to and including Facebook in some sort of regards over the years, and more now, again, these days, obviously, as well, what with the kind of the new regime as well. But they've kind of always been kind of ethically challenged to some extent, right? And many other big tech companies and all the other firms out there that are harvesting data and putting kind of manipulative patterns onto the screen and stuff. It feels like maybe AI deserves special attention, but do you feel that ethics was kind of going in the right direction and then AI disrupted it? Or do you think that it was already kind of bad and AI just made it worse?
Bad is an interesting word. I think ethics always lagged behind the technology, right? And yes, we can talk about social media and the problems with moderation, content, good content, bad content. We can talk about, how social media amplifies behaviors. And actually, interestingly enough, we can go right back in terms of the drive for technology and sort of innovation to things like, last year there was the movie Oppenheimer. And,
Yep.
we can go right back there to, this sort of question of there is a technology race. There's a race to innovate, even if it's in a very different industry there. And look, it really poses the questions of how some inventors and innovators, when they look back a little bit later, have real serious misgivings about the need for speed versus actually taking a moment to step back and assess the impact of those software or product experiences on people's lives. And why we're all in this, why do some of us work in the technology industry? I am a technologist. I started as a programmer because I like building stuff and I love building things and products that are smart and are clever and are going to augment people's lives. And also, excitingly, augment people's knowledge. That's kind of the point, right? So now that we have hundreds of millions of people's lives being touched by both social media and a growing amount now with AI-driven products, I think the difference is the same challenge, but the scale is growing, right? The scale of how many people's lives are impacted. But we also have to think about, algorithmic accountability. We have to think about ethical considerations and, responsible development, responsible testing, responsible deployment of products and ongoing, how do all of the companies in this AI arms race, what kind of frameworks or best practice do we need? Do they exist already? A lot of AI ethics is dominated by conversations about what governments are going to do to regulate and to hold us back. And, that's a whole nother thing, regulation and compliance. But there are also things that the industry can do from within to demonstrate that transparency, and to demonstrate, how a ethical approach to AI product development is built in from the inception. And I think, we're all learning. It's very, very early days. But I think it's important to land the principle and the concept, which is this isn't a government thing alone. And actually all of us, the hairs on our back stand up when we start thinking about governments dabbling in regulation. I certainly believe that regulation is needed. But sometimes I don't think governments on both sides of the Atlantic have enough industry expertise and experience sometimes that feeding in to legislation and guidance. And that's a whole nother talking point. But really, what I'm passionate about is what can the industry do from within? And there's certainly responsibilities at C-suite level, senior engineering management, But also what I'd like to do is highlight the, product managers and their responsibilities and the opportunities that there are out there for them to, get certified, to share best practice and learn from one another as a community when it comes to developing AI-driven products.
So if we assume that what you're saying is correct, and by the way, I completely agree with it, but if we were to assume that, what are some of the implications of, or some of the kind of ethical failings that you see out there at the moment? Before we talk about maybe even how we solve some of them, I mean, you talked a bit about sort of training and certification, but maybe some more concrete steps. But like, what are you seeing either yourself or have been told about or seeing in the news, like things that you think almost like red flags from an ethical perspective that you feel need to be addressed?
It's what some companies are lacking. And I think some of the big companies like Meta and Amazon and, the big ones are starting to address, what do we do as an organization in a couple of key areas? And really where, a number of organizations fall back is that they are not addressing accountability and don't have systems, processes, or even individuals responsible for the algorithmic accountability of AI systems. People should look around themselves and say, actually, in a large engineering org with multiple teams working on multiple parts of a product, who is the individual that is responsibility overall for the accountability of AI systems when they go wrong? We're well familiar also with data and how that's handled. So there's also, responsibility for the privacy of user data and its security. And then, there's the transparency, and this is the crux, the transparency of the decision making of the AI technology that is in place. So, what kind of method of machine learning is used? And, again, if something goes wrong or if something needs to be tested and demonstrated that it's safe, how can product managers and engineering teams actually be transparent about how an AI-driven product has made a certain decision, whether it's supervised, an AI assistant perhaps, or whether it's fully autonomously, where you may well have an AI agent that is carrying out complex tasks that are end-to-end, without much supervision, in fact, no supervision at all. And so there needs to be responsibility for that. And then also the big one is bias. Okay. Someone needs to be keeping an eye on and understanding whether AI models in place, particularly LLMs, understanding and addressing biases. So there needs to be processes for testing, very much like code, testing in development, testing before you go live, and ongoing monitoring on the impact of customers in a live environment. And some companies are geared up to do this very well, and other companies literally don't. They just build and ship and hope that nothing goes wrong.
But, thinking of those companies and probably many companies, not even just the ones that are building at speed, but there are going to be some people listening to this thinking or saying, well, yeah, but that all sounds hard and complicated. And also in some cases, there aren't even good oversight mechanisms, certainly when it comes to things like LLMs, like, the explainability of some of these systems isn't necessarily where it needs to be, even from the source systems are kind of, black boxes to an extent, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Which makes it quite hard then for some, little startup who, trying to make a dent in the world or whatever, and they're sitting there saying, well, we don't even know how to do this. So like, yeah, we'll just do it later. And then, of course, later never comes. So I guess, and you talked about it a little bit earlier, this idea about like the systems and such that we could have in place. Like, do those systems reliably exist and it's just expensive to implement them? Or are there some situations, in your opinion, where it's hard to even think of a decent scalable solution that could do some of the things that you've been advocating for?
Yeah, there's best practices. There are frameworks, and I think the main place to start is actually acknowledging the scale of this challenge. Doesn't have to be a problem, and coming up with solutions that are proportionate to the size of your business. So, as you've touched upon, Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, IBM, big big guns like that have infinite resources and can certainly set up a framework of people with responsibilities. However, a
But they're
good
firing them all.
starting
They're
point.
firing all of these people.
Yeah, well, they are. That's a very recent development, and I'll not comment on that because we're sitting at a political channel. But yeah, I mean, they may well be rolling back from it, but actually, they are putting a lot of it in place in anticipation of regulation. We have, AI auditing, which is now a thing. And then in terms of product managers, there are things that they can do to learn and to understand, what's going to be proportionate for my organization. What can I do? What does my manager need to be aware of? What does the leadership need to be aware of? And, there's a good place to start is online courses and communities. There are various certifications in responsible and ethical AI directly aimed at product managers. So I don't know whether it's appropriate. I can certainly provide some links to the resources that I'm about to mention, but essentially, IBM themselves have an AI product manager professional certification. And Mind the Product, which hopefully is a group that many product managers will be familiar with, they actually have an ethical AI hub, which is full of resources of emerging best practice, templates, articles, and also meetups, actually. So there's a whole community out there that is dedicated to how do we actually work this out together? And how can we share what's working and what isn't working? And a couple of other resources, just to mention very quickly for product managers. Udemy, we're all familiar with Udemy courses. There's an AI product manager training masterclass from Udemy, I believe. Coursera is another one where there's an AI product manager specialization. And, there's also a number of groups. AI for People is a community group, online community group. There's a partnership on AI. And also Deloitte have a trustworthy AI framework, which is well worth product managers checking out. So, there's a growing number of resources out there to support the product manager and product marketing community, senior managers and, small to medium to large enterprises and businesses with these problems.
Right. Well, I'm sure we can link some of those into the show notes at least, just to kind of give people a head start. I thankfully always assume that these AI product management courses are just trying to get people to hustle as quickly as possible. So it's good to hear that some of them are trying to do it the right way round. But a lot of people might listen to this and say, well, that sounds good in theory, but at the same time, like a lot of the issues that you've been talking about have been kind of big picture, quite high level issues. Are there any kind of specific examples that you've had or seen that this could be applied to, like some specific news stories where ethical boundaries were crossed, or like a bad thing happened, like something that you'd use as like a poster child for this type of, to justify this type of line of reasoning? Like anything spring to mind?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it relates to data security, but I mean, I think it's important to think about, really think about the hundreds of millions of lives touched daily by AI assistants being rolled out by the likes of Microsoft, Amazon, across application sort of portfolios that we use on a daily basis. But for example, IBM in 2020, and this is a while back, but actually they had problems with their facial recognition software. And it was actually withdrawn, having actually been used quite extensively due to concerns over racial profiling. And one reason why I'm actually really passionate about this is, although I'm passionate about driving technology, I also am aware of the impact on different communities, ethnicities, and, the scale of profiling that is actually, brought to bear by AI technology. It's not necessarily a new world, but it's one that grows exponentially in scale. And we've had sort of, I think a very high level one was Amazon themselves, because they actually produced an AI recruiting tool that, again, in the US, started to become quite widely adopted. But in 2023, it was proven that basically there was an intrinsic bias, and Amazon were using it themselves for their own recruiting processes. But there was an intrinsic bias that was anti-female, basically, and was working against women applying for technical positions at Amazon. So these are the kinds of problems I've certainly aware of, and there are various books and speakers talking about this, but AI being used to determine in the judiciary service in the US, being used to determine the likelihood of offenders reoffending. And again, bias has been shown that racial profile has rolled into this, and the bias is unacceptable. So they're just a couple of examples, pretty high profile ones, of how AI can touch hundreds of millions of people's lives and really have a detrimental impact on them, and can really detrimentally impact fairness. So it's something that we all need to be very cognizant of, and not disconnected from when we are responsible for producing and developing certain AI-driven products.
No, absolutely. It's interesting. It's that kind of concept that, some people sit there and say, oh, well, AI can't be biased. It's just a machine. But it's almost like the industrialization of the bias that's inherent in all of our data that it's been trained on, right? Because that's where it's all come
100%.
from. And guess what? They were all biased before, and that's just sort of been then coded in. So, yeah, no, I absolutely agree that there should be some stuff, well, not stuff, but like there should be some efforts for people to, at least think about it, right? Like, I don't think it's possible to fix it. I'm not sure the
No, not
finger
at all.
click will come out, but it's not possible to fix it all in one go. But like, if we can kind of take iterative steps towards it, then, and I guess also crucially keep and maintain and build support for it not to fall off the agenda. Like, I know we say this isn't political, but like, there's this kind of, anti-woke agenda that everyone's talking about these days. And this idea that anyone speaking up about any kind of trauma is in some way kind of, just being a snowflake. It's like, well, come on. Like, I'm going to take the opinions of the people that say that they're being harmed over the people that say, oh, everything's fine. So trying to maintain support for that rather than kind of almost folding under the pressure of people saying that, oh, this is all, you're just being too sensitive. I guess that's the other battle as well, right? Like we can't let those people stifle the conversation.
Oh, we certainly can't. And, it's the very beginning of the conversation. This isn't a political piece. This is about if we are being product and experience driven. We want our products and experiences to augment and to add value. In a lot of these cases where it's gone wrong, the actual producers of that software have rolled that software back and have acknowledged that it is not behaving in the intended way. So there is a little bit of awareness here. And I think, it's nothing to do with the misuse of the word woke. But it's more about, hey, we're all in this industry. We do love it. I love working in it. And I would rather be in technology than other industries. And I think it's way more diverse and inclusive than many other old school industries. So, that is the positive and exciting thing about it. But I don't think anyone in our industry is happy about the fact that we still live in, we have an industry that is and I'm not talking about the reasons, I'm just talking about what is. We have an industry which is dominated by, certainly on the builder side of the industry and management, by men, and is not as diverse as we would all like. And I think actually most of us really enjoy working in diverse teams where we are in them. But we have to remember that not everybody is lucky enough to be working in diverse teams. And it's usually not anything that's individual. Things are slowly changing. But we just also need to not just be cognizant of our organizations, but what that can lead to in terms of thinking, planning, and developing products. But, the biggest area that we can take action now is testing. So everyone who's a software engineer and or developer is going to be able to think, yeah, we all know that the more testing that we do that is forensic and rigorous, the better our products are going to be. This is just another paradigm of user testing that is going to make our products even better. And it's not really anything that most people find controversial. We all know that usually what's the first thing to get cut when we're trying to get things to market at speed? Testing, whatever kind of testing it is. But I think, particularly even for a small startup, you get these things wrong and that can be the end of your business. One can fly with the risk. But again, Amazon can withstand making a mistake, for example, on one of the products in its huge portfolio of products. However, many companies can't afford to.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, you don't want to end your company over some, bad decision gone wrong, right? But I guess it's just up to people to try and right-size their bets and use the best evidence and, like you say, test what they can. But that kind of segues nicely in then, again, obviously working for a testing company yourself. Where can people find you after this if they want to chat more about any of the stuff they've heard, find out about your company, or just generally catch up?
Okay. I'm always up for a chat. If it's about technology, if it's about AI, I'm there. You can find me lurking on various parts of the internet. My handle is Firestarter, and that is spelt Fire Start with an R and no E at the end. You can find me on X Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, all the usual places as Firestarter, and that's certainly my alias. And it's an alias because I really, really believe this fight is very much akin to a Star Wars analogy, which is, you've got the Rebel Alliance who are trying to build fantastic products, and then you've got the dark side that are actually just in it for the money and there to exploit customers and people and trying to make as much money as possible rapidly. And somehow we've got to find a way through for AI for good. We've got to be able to accelerate innovation where AI poses many opportunities that are for the benefit of humankind. And we've got to just, literally just be responsible, ethical, and scrutinize AI that may well be for profit only, might be to put a rocket on Mars. I don't know. But where AI has far-reaching implications for individuals, certainly, and this is going to be used by governments and big corporations. Yeah, it's just like, it doesn't have to be breaks. It just needs to be a responsible approach to it where everything can be justified and that all reasonable steps have been taken to test products and to ensure that they are not detrimental to the end users.
Here, here. Well, fingers crossed that we'll get there step by step and test by test. But I also won't hold my breath. But I'll keep trying to do my
Neither will
best to
I.
help out. Well, obviously thought-provoking stuff, and hopefully the battle will definitely continue. But as for now, all I can do is thank you for your hot take.
Thank you, Jason. It's been really good to talk to you. Thank you.